Welcome to Cozy Mystery Tales. I'm Eleanor, your host with a passion for classic whodunits. Pull up a comfy chair, grab a cup of tea, and let's dive into a chilling tale straight from the golden age of mysteries. Today we're unraveling The Vanishing Heiress of Snowfield Cottage, a Miss Marple death mystery, inspired by the incomparable Agatha Christie. This is a long, relaxing story perfect for a cozy evening. Over 90 minutes of narration to keep you guessing. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more tales like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Is it a snowy night where you are? Or perhaps a bustling city? Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. In the winter of 1927, the village of St. Mary Mead lay quiet under a sky heavy with the promise of snow. The first tentative flakes drifted past the ivy-clad windows of the vicarage where Miss Jane Marple sat by her modest hearth, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. A spinster of advancing years with soft white hair and eyes that missed nothing, Miss Marple was no stranger to the undercurrents of human nature. Her village, though sleepy to the untrained eye, was a tapestry of secrets woven with the threads of gossip, envy, and unspoken desires. It was here, on a morning as crisp as the frost on her garden gate, that a telegram arrived, its sharp edges betraying urgency. The telegram was from Lady Constance Hargrove, an old friend whose grand manor stood some miles away in the rolling Hertfordshire hills. "Dearest Jane," it read in hurried script, "urgent matter at Snowfield Cottage. Heiress in distress. Join me at once. Snow threatens isolation. Constance." Miss Marple paused, her needle still, and read the message again. Snowfield Cottage was a name that carried whispers, tales of wealth, scandal, and a family unraveling at the seams. She folded the telegram with care, placing it in her reticule beside a small notebook, its pages already filled with observations from village life. Whatever lay ahead, she sensed it would require her sharpest attention. Snowfield Cottage, she recalled, belonged to the Sinclair family, once luminaries of London society, now cloistered in the countryside after a series of misfortunes. The heiress in question was Amelia Sinclair, a young woman of 25 whose beauty was matched only by the rumors that trailed her. Raven-haired, with emerald eyes that sparkled like cut glass, Amelia had inherited a vast fortune from her late father, Sir Reginald Sinclair, a shipping magnate whose death a year prior had sparked endless speculation. Was it heart failure, as the coroner claimed, or something more sinister? The will, too, was a point of contention, favoring Amelia over her elder brother, Reginald Jr., and setting tongues wagging from Mayfair to the Midlands. Miss Marple rose, her movements deliberate, and began preparations for the journey. She packed a sturdy valise with woolen shawls, a adityae, thermos of tea, and her ever-present knitting, both a comfort and a guise for her watchful eyes. The snow was falling faster now, dusting the cobblestones outside like sugar on a cake. She donned her heaviest coat, pinned her hat securely, and sent word to the local station for a carriage. The train from St. Mary Mead to the nearest stop was a short but chilly affair, the carriage windows fogging with her breath as the countryside blurred into a white haze. At the station, a horse-drawn sleigh awaited, its driver muffled against the biting wind, the horses stamping impatiently in the deepening snow. The journey to Lady Constance's manor was slow, the sleigh creaking through drifts that rose like waves. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to Amelia Sinclair. She had heard snippets of the girl's story, a whirlwind engagement to Victor Langford, a painter of modest means but considerable charm, a brother embittered by his disinheritance, an aunt, Beatrice Hargrove, whose sharp tongue masked a dependence on Amelia's wealth. There were whispers, too, of a loyal maid with grievances, a gardener with a grudge, and a society friend whose loyalty was questioned. Each was a thread in the tapestry, and Miss Marple knew that pulling one might unravel the whole. Lady Constance's manor appeared through the snow like a beacon, its chimneys puffing against the gray sky. The door swung open before the sleigh halted, and Constance herself stood there, her face pale beneath her fur-lined hood. "Jane, thank heavens," she said, ushering her friend inside. The drawing room was a haven of warmth, with a fire crackling in the grate and the scent of cedar mingling with the faint sweetness of sherry. Constance poured a glass for herself, offering one to Miss Marple, who declined with a gentle smile. "Tell me everything, Constance," Miss Marple said, settling into an armchair. Her knitting resumed as if by instinct. "People are like my knitting. Simple stitches on the surface, but the pattern hides complexity." Constance sighed, her hands twisting the hem of her shawl. "It's Amelia Sinclair. She's hosting a gathering at Snowfield Cottage this weekend, family and friends, to celebrate her engagement to Victor Langford. But I received a note from her yesterday, Jane. She's terrified. She wrote of a shadow over the house and of fearing for her life. With this blizzard coming, they'll be cut off. I'm invited, and I want you to come with me, discreetly as my cousin. You see things others miss." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Fear is a powerful lens, Constance. It sharpens some truths and distorts others. Who will be at this gathering?" Constance leaned forward, her voice low. "Amelia, of course. Then Reginald Sinclair Jr., her brother, a brooding man furious about the will. He believes the fortune was rightfully his as the eldest. Aunt Beatrice Hargrove, my cousin, a widow who relies on Amelia's generosity but resents her youth and wealth. Victor Langford, the fiancé, handsome. But there's talk he's drowning in debt and sees Amelia as his salvation. Sarah Wilkins, the maid, has served the Sinclairs for years but has been heard muttering about mistreatment. Old Tom Hargreaves, the gardener, a gruff sort with a long-standing grudge against Sir Reginald over unpaid wages. And Clara Beaumont, Amelia's closest friend, a society girl with a dazzling smile but secrets, rumors of a failed romance that left her bitter. Miss Marple nodded, her needles never faltering. A tangled skein indeed. Family ties can bind tightly, but they can also choke. And the cottage itself? Remote, in a valley surrounded by woods, Constance replied. Stone walls, ivy-covered, with sturdy doors and windows to keep out the cold. Amelia's bedroom is upstairs, locked with a key from the inside. A fortress within a fortress, she says, but this storm, Jane, it's no ordinary snow. They're saying it could be the worst in decades. No one will get in or out once it hits. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney, and outside the wind began to howl, a mournful sound that seemed to carry secrets of its own. Miss Marple's mind was already at work, cataloging names, motives, and possibilities. She thought of her village, where a stolen pie or a harsh word could reveal as much about human nature as a grand scandal. Snowfield Cottage, she suspected, was a stage set for something darker than a celebration. As evening fell, Constance outlined the plan. They would travel to Snowfield Cottage the next morning, braving the worsening storm. Miss Marple would pose as a distant relative, unassuming but observant, her presence unlikely to rouse suspicion. Constance's worry was palpable, her hands trembling as she spoke of Amelia's note. She wrote of footsteps in the night, Jane, of feeling watched. I fear we may be too late. Miss Marple placed her knitting in her lap, her gaze steady. We shall see, Constance. The truth, like snow, settles in its own time. We must simply brush away the drifts to find it. The blizzard grew fiercer, rattling the manor's windows, and Miss Marple retired to her guest room, her mind alive with questions. The players were set, the stage prepared, but the script remained hidden. As she drifted to sleep, the wind seemed to whisper a warning, and in her dreams she saw a cottage swallowed by snow, its secrets locked within like a heart beating in the dark. Chapter 2. Arrival at the Cottage. The morning of January 12, 1927 dawned with a sky so heavy it seemed the heavens themselves were sagging under the weight of the coming storm. Snow fell in thick, relentless curtains, transforming the Hertfordshire countryside into a vast, featureless expanse of white. Miss Jane Marple, wrapped in her warmest shawl and clutching her reticule, sat beside Lady Constance Hargrove in a sleigh that creaked and groaned through the deepening drifts. The horses, their breath steaming in the frigid air, struggled forward, guided by a driver whose face was barely visible beneath his scarf and hat. The journey to Snowfield Cottage, nestled in a secluded valley some miles from Lady Constance's manor, was a battle against the elements. Each gust of wind a reminder of the isolation awaiting them. Miss Marple's thoughts were as sharp as the icicles dangling from the sleigh's edges. She had spent the previous evening piecing together the fragments of information Constance had provided about the Sinclair family and their circle. Amelia Sinclair, the heiress at the heart of this gathering, was a figure of fascination and controversy. Her beauty, raven hair, emerald eyes, and a smile that could disarm the sternest critic, was matched by a fortune that had turned family ties into a web of envy and resentment. The telegram's mention of an heiress in distress lingered in Miss Marple's mind, a thread she intended to pull until the pattern emerged. As the sleigh rounded a bend, Snowfield Cottage came into view, its stone walls rising from the snow like a fortress from a fairy tale gone awry. Ivy clung to the facade, its leaves dusted white, and smoke curled from multiple chimneys, promising warmth within. The windows glowed faintly, like eyes peering through the blizzard, and the surrounding woods, now a frozen labyrinth, added to the sense of seclusion. The cottage was no mere rustic retreat. It was a grand estate, its isolation both a charm and a curse. Miss Marple noted the heavy oak door, the sturdy shutters, and the absence of any tracks in the snow. A blank canvas that could hide or reveal much. The sleigh halted, and the driver, muttering about the worsening storm, helped them down. The door swung open before they could knock, revealing Amelia Sinclair herself, her cheeks flushed from the cold but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. She wore a velvet dress of deep green, her hair swept up in a style that spoke of elegance under strain. "Lady Constance, thank heavens you've braved this dreadful weather," she exclaimed, her voice bright but brittle. "And this must be your cousin, Miss Marple. Welcome to Snowfield Cottage. Do come in. It's frightful out there." They stepped into a hall paneled in dark oak, where a fire roared in a massive stone hearth. The air carried the comforting sense of burning logs, beeswax polish, and a hint of mulled wine simmering somewhere nearby. Amelia led them to the grand parlor, a room adorned with heavy drapes, polished furniture, and a chandelier that glittered despite the gloom outside. The other guests were already assembled, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions, each betraying a private calculation. Reginald Sinclair Jr. stood by the fireplace, a cigar smoldering between his fingers as he paced with the restless energy of a caged animal. His dark hair was slicked back, but his eyes, shadowed and intense, darted toward Amelia with barely concealed resentment. Aunt Beatrice Hargrove, a widow with a pinched face and a penchant for sherry, sat ramrod straight in a high-backed chair, her black mourning dress a stark contrast to the room's warmth. Victor Langford, Amelia's fiancé, leaned against a window, sketching idly in a small notebook, his handsome features softened by a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sarah Wilkins, the maid, moved silently, pouring tea with hands that trembled slightly, her plain gray uniform doing little to hide her sullen demeanor. Old Tom Hargreaves, the gardener, looked out of place indoors, his weathered face and calloused hands better suited to the outdoors, though the storm had forced his inclusion. Clara Beaumont, Amelia's society friend, perched on a sofa, her laughter at some unheard jest ringing a touch too shrill. "Everyone, this is Lady Constance and her cousin, Miss Marple," Amelia announced, her voice striving for cheer. "We're all here to celebrate, well, my engagement, and to weather this storm together." Her smile faltered, and Miss Marple caught the glance she cast toward Victor, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The parlor buzzed with forced pleasantries. Reginald broke the silence, his voice sharp. "Father's will was a travesty, Amelia, you know it. The estate should have been mine." He exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. Aunt Beatrice sipped her sherry and added, "Blood is thicker than water, dear, but money thickens it further. You've done well for yourself, haven't you?" Her tone was laced with venom, her dependence on Amelia's generosity a poorly kept secret. Victor set down his sketchbook and crossed to Amelia's side, slipping an arm around her. "Let's not spoil the evening with old grudges," he said smoothly, though Miss Marple noted the tension in his jaw. Sarah, clearing a tray, muttered something under her breath, her eyes flashing with resentment. Old Tom, nursing a mug of ale, grunted, "Sir Reginald owed me years of wages, never paid up even in death." Clara, attempting to lighten the mood, launched into a tale of a London ball, but her laughter felt hollow, her eyes darting to Victor. Miss Marple, seated quietly with her knitting, observed it all. The parlor's layout was imprinted in her mind. A wide staircase leading to the upper rooms, a side door to the kitchen, and tall windows bolted against the storm. She noted the heavy key Amelia clutched, presumably for her bedroom door upstairs. The cottage, she realized, was a fortress, its isolation amplified by the blizzard. No one could leave, and no help could arrive until the snow ceased. As the afternoon waned, the group moved to the dining room for luncheon. Cold meats, bread, and steaming soup served by Sarah with a deference that bordered on defiance. Conversation turned to the weather, the guests' voices rising to drown out the wind's howl. "This storm's a beast," old Tom said, his voice rough as gravel. "Woods are impassable. We're stuck here, like it or not." Reginald snorted. "Fitting, isn't it? Trapped with family squabbles and bad blood." Amelia paled, her fork pausing mid-air. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes moving from face to face. She noticed small things. The way Victor's hand lingered on Amelia's, the faint stain of ink on Clara's fingers, the mud on old Tom's boots despite his claim of staying indoors. Sarah's apron pocket bulged slightly, as if hiding something heavier than a cloth. Aunt Beatrice's gloves, neatly folded beside her plate, bore a faint trace of dampness, as if recently touched by snow. Each detail was a stitch in the pattern, though the full design remained elusive. As evening approached, the blizzard grew fiercer, rattling the windows and sending drafts through the hall. Amelia rose, her face drawn. "I'm feeling a touch unwell," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll retire early. Please, everyone, lock your doors tonight. The storm, it brings ghosts." She clutched her key tighter and ascended the stairs, the group listening as the lock of her bedroom door clicked shut. Miss Marple excused herself to her guest room, a small but cozy space with a view of the snow-choked valley. She sat by the window, her knitting a steady rhythm, and replayed the day's observations. The tensions were palpable. Reginald's bitterness, Beatrice's envy, Victor's charm tinged with desperation. Sarah's quiet anger, Tom's old wounds, Clara's forced gaiety. The cottage was a pressure cooker, and Amelia's fear suggested a crack about to split wide open. In the dead of night, Miss Marple stirred, woken by a sound, a soft creak in the hall, followed by a whisper too faint to discern. She rose, slipping on her shawl, and peered into the corridor. Shadows danced in the flickering light of a single candle left burning. The house was still, save for the storm's relentless wail. She returned to her room, her mind alert. Snowfield Cottage was no longer just a refuge. It was a stage, and the curtain was about to rise on a drama she could only guess at. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. The morning light struggled to pierce the blizzard's veil, casting Snowfield Cottage in a dim, ghostly glow. The snow had piled high overnight, sealing the estate in a cocoon of white, the world beyond its walls as unreachable as a distant star. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken tensions, the previous day's introductions having done little to ease the undercurrents swirling among the gathered guests. Miss Jane Marple, seated in the parlor with her knitting, observed the room with the quiet intensity of a hawk watching a field. Her needles clicked softly, a rhythm that belied the sharpness of her mind as she catalogued every glance, every word, every hesitation. The night had been restless. Miss Marple had woken more than once to the sound of creaks in the old house, floorboards settling perhaps, or footsteps too cautious to be innocent. The storm's howl masked much, but not enough to dull her instincts. Amelia Sinclair's parting words at dinner, her cryptic mention of ghosts and her insistence on locked doors, hung in the air like a fog. The heiress's fear was a thread Miss Marple intended to follow, and the morning's conversations offered a chance to tug at it. Breakfast was a subdued affair, served in the dining room by Sarah Wilkins, whose movements were precise but her eyes downcast, avoiding contact. The table was laden with porridge, toast, and a pot of strong tea, but appetites were scarce. Reginald Sinclair Jr. slouched in his chair, his cigar absent but his scowl ever present. "This blasted snow," he muttered, stirring his tea with unnecessary force. "Trapped like rats in a cage." Aunt Beatrice Hargrove, sipping her customary sherry even at this early hour, shot him a look. "Mind your manners, Reginald. We're guests here, after all." Her tone dripped with sarcasm, her dependence on Amelia's wealth a poorly veiled barb. Victor Langford, Amelia's fiancé, sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. He spoke little, his eyes flitting to the windows as if expecting rescue or escape. Clara Beaumont, the society friend, tried to lighten the mood with chatter about London's latest fashions, but her laughter rang hollow, her fingers nervously twisting a silk handkerchief. Old Tom Hargreaves, the gardener, looked even more out of place in the dining room's elegance, his rough hands cradling a mug of tea as if it were an alien object. Amelia herself was pale, her emerald eyes shadowed, her responses to questions brief and strained. Miss Marple, positioned at the table's end, sipped her tea and let the conversation flow around her. She had a gift for fading into the background, her unassuming presence encouraging others to speak freely, unaware of the net she was weaving. The first thread came loose when Reginald, unable to contain himself, leaned toward Victor. "You know, Langford," he said, his voice low but carrying, "Father was out of his mind those last months. That will, leaving everything to Amelia, it's a farce. I was the heir, the eldest. She charmed him, didn't she? Turned him against me." Victor's jaw tightened, but his reply was smooth. "Reginald, you're letting bitterness cloud your judgment. Amelia's done nothing but try to keep the family together." His words were conciliatory, but Miss Marple noted the flicker of unease in his eyes. Victor, she recalled from Constance's briefing, was a painter with debts piling higher than the snow outside. Amelia's fortune was his lifeline, and a quarrelsome brother-in-law was a complication he could ill afford. Aunt Beatrice set down her glass with a clink. "Family together?" she scoffed. "Amelia's got the money, but she's no saint, I've seen. The letters she keeps hidden. Love notes from some fool before you, Victor. She's not as innocent as she plays." Her words were a calculated jab, and Amelia's cheeks flushed, her hand withdrawing from Victor's. Clara, sitting across from Beatrice, paled, her handkerchief twisting tighter. Miss Marple's needles paused for a fraction of a second. Letters were a clue, but were they truth or misdirection? Sarah, clearing plates, overheard and muttered something under her breath. Miss Marple caught the words mistreated and ungrateful, her sharp ears missing nothing. Old Tom, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up, his voice rough as the bark he tended. Sir Reginald was no saint either. Owed me wages for years, promised to settle up, then died without a penny paid. Amelia's no better, keeping me on scraps. His grudge was an old wound festering still. Miss Marple's mind turned to Sir Reginald's death, a topic Constance had mentioned with unease. Officially it was heart failure, but whispers of poison had circulated, fueled by the suddenness of his collapse and the contentious will that followed. Amelia's inheritance came with a condition. She must marry within a year to secure the fortune outright, else it would revert to the estate's trustees. This, Miss Marple suspected, explained the hasty engagement to Victor, but it also raised questions. Who benefited if Amelia failed to meet the condition? Who had access to her father in his final days? As the meal ended, the group scattered, some to the parlor, others to their rooms. Miss Marple lingered in the hall, ostensibly admiring a series of family portraits lining the walls. The Sinclairs stared down from their frames, stern patriarchs, elegant matrons, and a young Amelia, her painted smile more carefree than the woman now upstairs. One portrait, of Sir Reginald, showed a man with sharp features and a gaze that seemed to follow her. Miss Marple noted a faint discoloration around the frame, as if it had been recently moved. A closer look revealed a loose floorboard beneath, a potential hiding place. She pressed gently, but it yielded nothing. A red herring, perhaps, but she filed it away. Later in the parlor, she overheard Clara speaking to Beatrice in hushed tones. "You shouldn't mention those letters," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "Amelia's nervous enough, and you know I cared for Victor once. It's not fair to drag up the past." Beatrice's reply was sharp. "Fair? Nothing's fair when money's involved, my dear. You're jealous, admit it. She took him from you." Clara's eyes welled and she fled the room. Miss Marple's needles clicked on, but her mind was racing. Clara's jealousy was a new thread, one that tangled with Victor's motives and Amelia's secrets. She sought out Sarah in the kitchen, offering to help with the washing up, a ruse to observe the maid. Sarah's hands were red from the hot water, her expression guarded. "You've been with the family a long time, haven't you, dear?" Miss Marple said kindly. Sarah nodded curtly. "Since I was a girl. Seen a lot, miss. Too much, maybe." Her pocket still bulged, and Miss Marple wondered if it held a key, a note, or something more sinister. Old Tom was next, found polishing his boots in a back room. "Storm's a bad omen," he grumbled. "Sir Reginald crossed me, and now his daughter's no different. Keeps me on out of pity, not fairness." His bitterness was palpable, but Miss Marple sensed no immediate threat, just a man nursing old wounds. As the day wore on, the group played cards and charades, but the games felt forced, the laughter brittle. Miss Marple noted the cottage's layout more closely. The staircase to Amelia's room was visible from the parlor, its door at the top heavy and oak, with a lock that looked newly fitted. The windows were bolted, the snow outside undisturbed, piling higher with each hour. She tested a theory, asking Constance about the house's history. "Any old passages or secret rooms?" she inquired lightly. Constance shook her head. "None that I know of, Jane. It's an old place, but straightforward. Amelia's room is secure, key inside, no other way in." The afternoon darkened, the storm's roar unrelenting. Amelia, who had been quiet, joined the group briefly, her eyes darting to the windows. "It feels like we're buried alive," she murmured, and Victor squeezed her hand. Miss Marple watched them closely, noting the strain in their touch. Was it love, or something more calculated? As evening approached, Amelia excused herself, claiming fatigue. "I'll lock my door again tonight," she said, her voice barely steady. "Please, everyone, be careful. The storm. It's not the only thing that feels wrong." The group murmured good nights, and Miss Marple heard the click of Amelia's lock echo down the hall. Retiring to her room, Miss Marple sat by the window, her knitting a pretense as she sifted through the day's clues. Reginald's resentment, Beatrice's envy, Victor's debts, Clara's jealousy, Sarah's grievances, Tom's grudge, the loose floorboard, the damp gloves, the bulging pocket, all pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. The storm outside raged, but inside Snowfield Cottage a different tempest was brewing, and Miss Marple knew it was only a matter of time before it broke. Chapter 4. The Vanishing Act. The night of January 12, 1927, wrapped Snowfield Cottage in a shroud of snow and silence, broken only by the relentless howl of the blizzard outside. The guests had retired after Amelia Sinclair's uneasy departure to her bedroom, her words about ghosts and locked doors lingering like a chill that no fire could dispel. Miss Jane Marple, tucked into her guest room, had not slept soundly. The creaks of the old house, the muffled whispers in the corridor, and the storm's ceaseless wail kept her senses sharp. Her knitting lay idle on the bedside table, her notebook open to a fresh page where she jotted impressions: Reginald's bitterness, Beatrice's sharp tongue, Victor's guarded charm, Sarah's resentment, Tom's old grudge, Clara's brittle laughter. Each was a thread, but the pattern remained elusive. At 2:30 in the morning, a scream shattered the stillness. It was Sarah Wilkins, the maid, her voice piercing the walls like a shard of glass. "Miss Amelia, she's gone! Oh, heaven help us, she's gone!" The cry roused the house, and Miss Marple, slipping on her shawl, was among the first to reach the upstairs hall. The others stumbled from their rooms, Reginald in a dressing gown, his hair disheveled. Aunt Beatrice clutching a candle, her face pale beneath her nightcap. Victor, his shirt untucked, eyes wide with panic. Clara, wrapped in a silk robe, her hands trembling, and old Tom, boots half-laced, looking as if he'd been roused from a dream of vengeance. Sarah stood before Amelia's bedroom door, her apron twisted in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "I heard a noise, a thud, like something falling," she stammered. "I knocked, but no answer. The door's locked, and she's not there." Victor pushed past, rattling the handle, but the heavy oak door held firm, its lock unyielding. "Amelia!" he shouted, pounding until his knuckles reddened. There was no response, only the storm's mocking roar. Reginald, his voice sharp with suspicion, demanded, "How do you know she's gone if the door's locked? Break it down." Old Tom, ever practical, fetched a heavy iron poker from the parlor, and with Victor's help they forced the door open, the lock splintering with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. The room beyond was eerily still, lit by a single oil lamp flickering on the bedside table. The bed was untouched, its covers smooth as if Amelia had never lain down. Her velvet dressing gown lay draped over a chair, her key still in the lock on the inside of the door. A half-written letter rested on the desk, the ink still wet. "I fear for my—" The sentence ended abruptly, the pen lying beside it as if dropped in haste. The windows were bolted shut, their latches secure, the glass frosted with ice. Snow piled high against the panes, undisturbed, with no trace of footprints or tampering outside. The chimney was narrow, barely wide enough for a child, let alone an adult. The room was a sealed box, yet Amelia Sinclair had vanished. Miss Marple stepped forward, her calm presence a stark contrast to the growing panic. "Let us be methodical," she said softly, her eyes scanning the room. "A locked room is only a puzzle until you find the right piece." She examined the door. The key was indeed in the lock, turned to secure it from within. The windows, when tested, were immovable, their bolts rusted with age. The floorboards were solid, no trapdoors or hidden panels. The wardrobe held only dresses, the trunk beneath the bed, only linens. Yet Amelia was gone, as if spirited away by the storm itself. Victor sank onto the bed, his face in his hands. "This is impossible," he muttered. "She was here. I heard her lock the door." Clara, hovering near the doorway, whispered, "It's like a ghost story. She said the storm brought ghosts." Her voice trembled, but Miss Marple noted a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, in her eyes. Reginald paced, his cigar now lit, smoke curling like a wraith. "This is no ghost," he snapped. "Someone's playing a trick, or worse." Aunt Beatrice, clutching her candle, murmured, "The girl was always dramatic. Perhaps she's hiding, toying with us." But her voice lacked conviction, her hands shaking. Sarah, still weeping, said, "I swear I heard that thud. I came straight away. The key was in the lock. I didn't touch it." Old Tom, leaning against the wall, grunted, "Snow's too deep for her to have gone out. No tracks, no nothing. Something's not right." Miss Marple, her knitting now in hand as a prop for thought, moved to the desk. The letter intrigued her. "I fear for my life? My fortune? My heart?" The ambiguity was deliberate, she suspected, a clue or a misdirection. She inspected the room further, noting small details. A melted candle stub on the windowsill, its wax pooling oddly, as if it had been moved while still soft. A faint scuff mark on the floor near the bed, barely noticeable. A single pearl earring, one of Amelia's favorites, lying under the desk, as if dropped in a struggle. Miss Marple pocketed the earring discreetly, her mind turning over possibilities. Could someone have entered through the chimney, however unlikely? No, the soot was undisturbed, a secret passage. She tapped the walls gently, but they were solid stone and oak. The locked room was a conundrum, a classic puzzle that demanded logic over superstition. The group, now huddled in the hall, began to fracture under the strain. Reginald pointed at Victor. "You were the last to see her, Langford. What did you do?" Victor's eyes flashed. "I was in my room, you fool. I loved her." Clara stepped between them, her voice shrill. "Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping." Aunt Beatrice, her sherry glass now retrieved, muttered, "If she's run off, it's no loss. Ungrateful child." Sarah, wiping her eyes, snapped, "Don't you dare speak of Miss Amelia like that. She was kind, even if you lot never saw it." Old Tom remained silent, his gaze fixed on the snow outside as if it held answers. Miss Marple, guiding the group downstairs to the parlor, suggested tea to calm nerves. As Sarah prepared it, Miss Marple observed her closely. The maid's apron pocket still bulged, and her hands trembled more than grief alone could explain. In the parlor, the fire had dwindled, and the room felt colder, the storm's presence inescapable. Lady Constance, who had been quiet, pulled Miss Marple aside. "Jane, this is dreadful. Amelia's gone, and I fear the worst. Could it be murder?" Her voice was a whisper, her eyes wide with dread. Miss Marple patted her hand. "We mustn't jump to conclusions, Constance. A disappearance is not yet a crime, but it is a mystery. And mysteries like my knitting unravel with patience." She returned to the group, her questions gentle but probing. "Did anyone hear anything before Sarah's scream? A door, a window, a voice?" Heads shook, but Miss Marple noted hesitations. Victor's pause, Clara's quick glance at Reginald, Beatrice's pursed lips. She turned her attention to the house's layout, recalling the staircase's visibility from the parlor, the absence of other entrances to Amelia's room. The snow outside was a perfect barrier. No one could have left without leaving tracks, yet none were visible. The melted candle nagged at her, a clue or a coincidence. The scuff mark suggested movement, but to where? And the earring? Had Amelia dropped it in haste, or had someone placed it there? As the group sipped tea, their voices grew heated. Reginald accused Sarah of negligence. Sarah retorted with accusations of family greed, and Victor pleaded for calm, his own composure fraying. Clara wept openly now, her handkerchief sodden, while old Tom muttered about curses and debts unpaid. Aunt Beatrice, her sherry glass empty, declared, "If she's gone, the fortune's up for grabs. Let's not pretend we're all saints here." Miss Marple, her knitting a steady rhythm, let them talk, their words revealing more than they knew. The locked room was a challenge, but human nature was her true domain. Someone in this house knew more than they admitted, perhaps several someones. The letter, the earring, the candle, the scuff mark. These were pieces, but the puzzle was incomplete. As the storm raged on, sealing them in, Miss Marple felt the weight of time pressing. Amelia's vanishing was no mere trick. It was the prelude to something darker, and the truth, like the snow, was piling higher with each passing hour. Chapter 5. Discovery in the Snow. The dawn of January 13, 1927, broke over Snowfield Cottage with a bleak, unrelenting light, filtered through the blizzard's unyielding veil. The snow had piled into drifts that buried fences and choked the narrow paths, rendering the estate a fortress besieged by winter. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive, the shock of Amelia Sinclair's impossible disappearance from her locked bedroom hanging over the guests like a pall. Miss Jane Marple, awake before the others, stood by her window, her knitting untouched as she gazed at the featureless white expanse. The storm had not abated, and the absence of tracks outside Amelia's window only deepened the mystery. Her mind churned with the clues from the night before. The half-written letter, the melted candle, the scuff mark, the lone pearl earring. Each was a thread, but the pattern remained maddeningly out of reach. The household stirred slowly, the weight of the night's events dulling their movements. Breakfast was abandoned, the dining room empty save for a pot of cooling tea. Sarah Wilkins, the maid, moved through her duties with mechanical precision, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep. Reginald Sinclair Jr. paced the parlor, his cigar smoke curling like a specter. Aunt Beatrice Hargrove clutched her sherry glass, her sharp tongue silenced for once. Victor Langford, Amelia's fiancé, sat by the fire, his sketchbook closed, his face etched with a grief that seemed genuine yet guarded. Clara Beaumont, the society friend, hovered near the windows, her silk robe crumpled, her usual vivacity extinguished. Old Tom Hargreaves, the gardener, had ventured out at first light, muttering about checking the grounds despite the storm. It was Tom who shattered the morning's uneasy quiet. His shout from the garden, raw and urgent, brought the household running. "Out here! In the snow! God help us!" Miss Marple, wrapping her shawl tightly, followed Lady Constance and the others as they stumbled through the back door, the cold biting at their faces. Tom stood near a snowdrift some 20 yards from the cottage, his breath steaming as he pointed to a crumpled shape half buried in the white. The group gathered, their gasps mingling with the wind's howl. It was Amelia Sinclair, her body stiff with cold, her raven hair splayed like ink against the snow. A dark stain marred her temple, the blood frozen into a grim halo. Her emerald eyes stared blankly at the sky, lifeless. Victor fell to his knees, a choked sob escaping him. "Amelia, no." Clara clutched his arm, her own tears falling, while Reginald turned away, his face unreadable. Aunt Beatrice whispered a prayer, her sherry glass forgotten in her hand. Sarah stood frozen, her apron twisted in her fists, her lips moving soundlessly. Tom, his weathered face grim, said, "Found her just as she is. No tracks, nothing. Snow's covered any sign." Miss Marple, her eyes sharp despite the scene's horror, noted the absence of footprints leading to or from the body. The drift was pristine save for Tom's own tracks, and the snow continued to fall, threatening to bury Amelia further. "Stay back, all of you," Miss Marple said softly but firmly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We must preserve what we can." She knelt, careful not to disturb the snow, and examined the body. Amelia wore her nightdress, a thin silk gown wholly unsuited to the cold, suggesting she hadn't left the house willingly. The wound on her temple was a single brutal blow, likely from a blunt object. Her hands were empty, but Miss Marple's gaze fell on her neck. Amelia's signature pearl necklace, a twin to the earring found in her room, was missing. The snow around her showed no signs of a struggle, no scuffs or marks beyond the indentation of her body. It was as if she had been placed there, or fallen from the sky itself. "How did she get out here?" Reginald demanded, his voice hoarse. "Her room was locked, the windows bolted. It's impossible." Victor, rising shakily, snapped, "Don't you dare imply she did this to herself. Someone did this, someone here." His eyes swept the group, lingering on Reginald, then Sarah. Clara, trembling, whispered, "The storm. It's like it swallowed her." Aunt Beatrice, her composure fraying, muttered, "This place is cursed. First Reginald Sr., now her." Sarah, her voice breaking, said, "I told you I heard a thud. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Miss Marple's mind raced. The locked room, the absence of tracks, the body in the snow. It was a puzzle designed to defy logic. She turned to Tom. "You're certain you saw no tracks when you found her?" He nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Snow's fresh, miss. Storm's been piling it up all night. If she walked out here, there'd be a trail, even faint." Miss Marple glanced at the cottage, its stone walls looming through the snow. Amelia's room was on the second floor, directly above. Could she have fallen? No, the windows were secure, and a fall wouldn't explain the blow to her head or the lack of tracks. Lady Constance, her face pale, pulled Miss Marple aside. "Jane, this is murder, isn't it? Poor Amelia, who could do such a thing?" Miss Marple patted her hand, her expression calm but her mind alert. "We must assume nothing, Constance, but observe everything. Someone in this house knows more than they say." She returned to the group, her questions gentle but pointed. "Did anyone leave their room after Amelia retired? Did you hear anything beyond Sarah's scream?" Victor shook his head, his voice hollow. "I was asleep until the scream woke me." Reginald grunted. "Same, though this old place creaks enough to wake the dead." Clara, wiping her eyes, said, "I heard nothing, I swear." Aunt Beatrice, her sherry glass now refilled, admitted, "I took a sleeping draught. I heard nothing until Sarah's cry." Sarah, trembling, repeated, "Just the thud, miss. I went to her door straight away." Tom, scratching his beard, said, "I was up late, tending the fire in my room, didn't hear a thing over the storm." Miss Marple noted their responses, her knitting resumed as a prop for thought. She led the group back inside, insisting Amelia's body be left untouched until the police could be summoned, though the storm made that a distant hope. In the parlor, she examined the clues anew. The missing necklace was significant. Had it been taken as a trophy or lost in a struggle? The blow to the head suggested intent, but the lack of tracks defied explanation. Could the storm have erased them? Possible, but the snow's depth and the body's position suggested otherwise. She returned to Amelia's room with Constance, the others too, shaken to follow. The scene was as they'd left it. The locked door, the key inside, the bolted windows, the half-written letter. Miss Marple studied the scuff mark near the bed, now suspecting it marked a hurried movement, perhaps a struggle. The melted candle on the windowsill caught her eye again. Its wax had dripped in a way that suggested it had been tilted, perhaps to signal or distract. She tested the window latch once more, confirming its rigidity. The chimney, too narrow for passage, showed no fresh soot. Yet Amelia had left this room only to be found dead outside. Back in the parlor, the group's nerves frayed further. Reginald accused Victor of staging the scene to deflect suspicion. "You needed her money, Langford. What did you do?" Victor lunged, only stopped by Clara's intervention. "Enough!" she cried. "We're all scared, but fighting won't bring her back." Sarah, serving tea with shaking hands, muttered, "She didn't deserve this. None of us did." Aunt Beatrice, her voice slurred, said, "Perhaps she ran off and fell. Foolish girl." Tom, stoking the fire, grunted, "No one runs in a storm like this. Someone carried her out there." Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the necklace. Had it been taken to suggest robbery, or was it a personal vendetta? She recalled Sarah's bulging pocket, Beatrice's damp gloves, Clara's nervous glances. Each guest was a piece in the puzzle, their motives, greed, jealousy, revenge, intertwined. The storm had trapped them, but it had also trapped the truth, and Miss Marple was determined to unearth it. As the snow continued to fall, burying Amelia's body in the secrets of Snowfield Cottage, she knew the key lay in the impossible. How a woman vanished from a locked room, only to be found dead in a drift with no trace of passage. The answer, she suspected, was closer than anyone dared admit. Chapter 6. Miss Marple's Entrance. The morning of January 13th, 1927, hung heavy over Snowfield Cottage, the blizzard outside a relentless force that sealed the estate in a cocoon of snow and suspicion. The discovery of Amelia Sinclair's body in a snowdrift with a fatal blow to her temple and no tracks to explain her passage from a locked room had plunged the household into a maelstrom of fear and accusation. The parlor, once a haven of warmth, now felt like a courtroom, with each guest eyeing the others as if searching for a telltale stain of guilt. Miss Jane Marple, seated in a corner with her knitting, had shed her guise of the unassuming spinster. The time for quiet observation was over. The puzzle demanded her active intervention. The group was gathered around the dwindling fire, their faces drawn. Victor Langford, Amelia's fiancé, clutched a handkerchief, his grief tinged with desperation. Reginald Sinclair Jr. paced, his cigar smoke curling like a noose. Aunt Beatrice Hargrove sipped sherry, her sharp eyes darting between the others. Clara Beaumont, the society friend, twisted her silk scarf, her earlier tears replaced by a nervous stillness. Sarah Wilkins, the maid, hovered near the tea tray, her hands unsteady. Old Tom Hargreaves, the gardener, leaned against the wall, his weathered face unreadable. Lady Constance, Miss Marple's ally, sat nearby, her expression one of quiet dread. Miss Marple set her knitting aside and rose, her voice calm but commanding attention. "My dear friends," she began, her tone warm yet precise, like a village gossip sharing a vital truth. "I've seen many a puzzle in my time, from stolen pies in St. Mary Mead to darker deeds. Human nature is the same, whether in a cottage or a manor. Amelia's death is no accident, and her disappearance from a locked room is no ghost story. We are trapped here by the storm, but the truth is trapped with us. Let us find it." The room stilled, her words cutting through the tension. Reginald snorted. "You? A spinster solving murders? This is no parlor game." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Games, Mr. Sinclair, often reveal the player's hand. Shall we begin?" Her authority, subtle but undeniable, shifted the dynamic. The guests, though skeptical, were too shaken to protest. She started with Victor, her questions gentle but probing. "Mr. Langford, you were closest to Amelia. Did she confide any fears beyond her words last night?" Victor hesitated, his fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "She was nervous, yes. Said she felt watched, but she wouldn't say more. I was in my room all night. Ask anyone." His voice cracked, but Miss Marple noted his eyes avoided hers, lingering on the floor. Next, she turned to Reginald. "Mr. Sinclair, your feelings about the will are no secret. Where were you after Amelia retired?" He stubbed out his cigar, his jaw tight. "In my room, smoking. I heard nothing until Sarah's scream. And don't look at me like that, I didn't touch her." His alibi was firm, but his fidgeting hands betrayed unease. Aunt Beatrice, her sherry glass trembling, was less cooperative. "I took a sleeping draught, as I said, slept like a stone." "This is nonsense, Miss Marple. Amelia probably fell, foolish girl." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Yet your gloves, Mrs. Hargrove, were damp last night, as if you'd been outside. Care to explain?" Beatrice paled, muttering, "I checked the shutters before bed. The snow got on them." The excuse was thin, and Miss Marple filed it away. Clara, her voice barely above a whisper, claimed, "I was asleep, I swear. I loved Amelia. She was my friend." But her eyes darted to Victor, and Miss Marple recalled Beatrice's hint of Clara's past affection for him. Jealousy, perhaps. Sarah, when questioned, repeated her story. "I heard a thud, ran to her door, found it locked. That's all I know." Her apron pocket, still bulging, caught Miss Marple's eye again. Old Tom, gruff as ever, said, "I was by my fire tending it. Storms too wild for anyone to be out there, but someone was, weren't they?" His gaze lingered on Sarah, a silent accusation. Miss Marple returned to the clues, her mind sifting through the locked room's secrets. She revisited Amelia's bedroom with Constance, the others too rattled to follow. The half-written letter, "I fear for my," suggested a threat. But was it genuine or staged? The melted candle on the windowsill, its wax pooled oddly, hinted at manipulation. Had it been used to signal someone outside? The scuff mark near the bed, faint but deliberate, suggested movement, perhaps a struggle. The missing pearl necklace, paired with the earring found under the desk, pointed to theft or a personal motive. She examined the window again, its bolts rusted but secure. A sudden thought struck her. Could a string or wire have been used to lock the door from outside, pulling the key into place? She tested the idea, but the key's weight and the lock's design made it unlikely. The chimney, too narrow for passage, showed no fresh soot. Yet Amelia had left this room only to be found dead in the snow. Miss Marple's gaze fell on the ceiling, where a faint crack ran along a beam. A hidden panel? She tapped it gently, but it held firm. Another red herring, perhaps. Back in the parlor, she shared her findings selectively, watching for reactions. "The absence of tracks is curious," she said. "The storm could have covered them, but the snow's depth suggests otherwise. And the candle, why was it moved? Someone wanted us to notice it." Victor shifted uncomfortably while Clara's eyes widened. Sarah, pouring tea, nearly dropped the pot. Miss Marple pressed further, testing a theory. "Miss Beaumont, you mentioned Amelia's letters. Did you see them yourself?" Clara flushed. "I heard about them from Beatrice. Amelia never showed me." Beatrice, defensive, snapped, "They exist, I tell you, hidden in her desk, full of scandal." Miss Marple noted the lie. Beatrice's certainty was too convenient, a possible distraction. She turned to Sarah. "You heard a thud, you say? From where exactly?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes flickering to the stairs. "From her room, I think. It was muffled." Miss Marple nodded, suspecting the thud was a staged clue meant to draw attention. She recalled the bulging pocket. Could it hold a duplicate key? "Mrs. Wilkins, might I see what's in your pocket?" Sarah froze, then pulled out a small cloth bag, revealing only a few coins. "Just my savings, miss," she said, but her relief was too quick. Old Tom, watching silently, offered a clue unprompted. "Found a bit of rope in the shed this morning, cut clean. Odd, since I ain't used it in weeks." Miss Marple's interest piqued. Rope could suggest a pulley or a staged exit, but it was too vague yet. She thanked him, her mind turning to the body's position. Amelia's nightdress, the single blow, the missing necklace, all pointed to intent, but the method remained elusive. The group's accusations flared anew. Reginald pointed at Sarah. "You had access to her room, didn't you? Always skulking about." Sarah retorted, "And you wanted her money. Don't pretend you didn't." Victor, his voice breaking, said, "None of this brings her back. We need answers, not blame." Clara, sobbing, murmured, "It's my fault. I should have stayed with her." Beatrice, her sherry glass empty, muttered, "The fortune's cursed. Always was." Miss Marple, steering the conversation, planted a seed. Suppose someone used the storm to their advantage, moving Amelia's body to hide the crime's true location. The snow could be an ally, not a barrier. The idea sparked unease. Victor's hands clenched, Clara's scarf twisted tighter. Sarah's eyes dropped. Miss Marple knew she was close, but the key piece was missing. The locked room, the snow, the clues, they formed a puzzle only human nature could solve. As the storm raged on, she resolved to watch and listen, certain the truth was stirring beneath the surface, ready to break free. Chapter 7, Interrogations and Alibis. The afternoon of January 13th, 1927 pressed down on Snowfield Cottage with a weight as heavy as the snow that entombed it. The discovery of Amelia Sinclair's body in a snowdrift, coupled with her impossible disappearance from a locked room, had turned the once cozy estate into a cauldron of suspicion. The blizzard raged on, sealing the guests in with their secrets, and Miss Jane Marple, her knitting now a mere prop in her lap, had taken the reins of the investigation. Her unassuming demeanor belied a mind as sharp as a needle, stitching together the clues, the half-written letter, the melted candle, the scuff mark, the missing pearl necklace, the lone earring, into a pattern that was beginning to take shape. The parlor, where the group now gathered, crackled with tension, the fire's warmth doing little to thaw the chill of distrust. Miss Marple stood, her voice soft but carrying the authority of one who had unraveled village mysteries with the same ease as a tangled skein of wool. "We are in a grave situation," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "Amelia's death was no accident, and her vanishing from a locked room suggests a cunning mind at work. Each of you has a piece of this puzzle, whether you know it or not. Let us speak plainly. Where were you? And what did you see or hear?" Her tone, warm yet insistent, invited confession but promised scrutiny. Victor Langford, Amelia's fiancé, spoke first, his hands twisting the handkerchief he still held. "I've told you, Miss Marple, I was in my room, asleep until Sarah's scream woke me. I loved Amelia. Why would I harm her?" His voice broke, but Miss Marple noted a flicker of calculation in his eyes, as if he were weighing how much to reveal. She pressed gently. "You mentioned her fear of being watched. Did she name anyone?" Victor hesitated, then shook his head. "No, she was vague. I thought it was nerves, the storm. I should have listened." His gaze dropped to his sketchbook, which lay closed on the table, its edges worn as if frequently handled. Reginald Sinclair, Jr., pacing near the fireplace, scoffed. "Save the theatrics, Langford. You needed her money to clear your debts. Everyone knows it." He turned to Miss Marple, his cigar glowing like an accusation. "I was in my room smoking, as I said. Didn't hear a thing until the scream. And no, I didn't touch her, despite what this lot thinks." His alibi was consistent, but Miss Marple noticed his fingers tapping nervously against his thigh, a telltale sign of unease. Aunt Beatrice Hargrove, her sherry glass refilled, bristled at the scrutiny. "I told you I took a sleeping draught. I was out cold until Sarah's racket woke me. As for my gloves being damp, I checked the shutters. Nothing more." Her voice was sharp, but her eyes darted to the side, avoiding Miss Marple's gaze. "Mrs. Hargrove," Miss Marple said kindly, "your gloves were damp, yet the shutters in your room are indoors. Perhaps you stepped outside." Beatrice flushed, muttering, "I may have opened the back door briefly to see the storm, that's all." The excuse was flimsy, and Miss Marple tucked it away like a loose thread. Clara Beaumont, her silk scarf now a knotted mess in her hands, spoke softly. "I was asleep, Miss Marple. I swear I heard nothing until Sarah screamed. Amelia was my friend. I'd never hurt her." Her eyes, red from crying, flickered toward Victor, betraying the jealousy Beatrice had hinted at. Miss Marple probed further. "You mentioned letters to Mrs. Hargrove. Did Amelia share any secrets with you, perhaps about her past?" Clara shook her head too quickly. "No, nothing specific, just gossip." Her hesitation suggested more, but Miss Marple let it pass for now. Sarah Wilkins, hovering near the tea tray, was next. Her hands trembled as she poured, and her voice was barely audible. "I heard the thud, like I said. I ran to Miss Amelia's door, knocked, got no answer. It was locked, so I screamed. That's all I know." Miss Marple's eyes lingered on Sarah's apron pocket, which no longer bulged but seemed carefully smoothed. "You've been loyal to the Sinclairs, Sarah," she said. "Yet you spoke of mistreatment. Did Amelia wrong you?" Sarah's lips tightened. "She was kind enough, but the family takes you for granted. I didn't hurt her, miss." Her defensiveness was a stitch in the pattern, but not yet the key. Old Tom Hargreaves, leaning against the wall, spoke gruffly. "I was by my fire, like I told you, didn't hear nothing over the storm, found that rope in the shed this morning, cut clean like someone used it for something. Don't know what." His mention of the rope, unprompted again, intrigued Miss Marple. Was it a clue or a distraction? She nodded, encouraging him to continue, but he fell silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Miss Marple returned to the clues, her mind weaving connections. The locked room remained the heart of the mystery. Amelia's key inside, windows bolted, no tracks in the snow. The melted candle suggested tampering, perhaps a signal or a diversion. The scuff mark near the bed hinted at a struggle, and the missing necklace pointed to theft or a personal vendetta. The half-written letter, "I fear for my," was a deliberate fragment meant to mislead or accuse. She recalled the pearl earring under the desk, its mate now missing with the necklace. Could it have been dropped intentionally to point to a specific culprit? She revisited the bedroom with Lady Constance, the others too rattled to join. The room was unchanged, the key in the lock, the windows secure, the letter unfinished. Miss Marple examined the candle again. Its wax pooled in a way that suggested it had been tilted while burning, then set down hastily. She tested the floorboards, finding the scuff mark more pronounced in daylight. A drag mark, perhaps, from a shoe or a body. The chimney, still too narrow, offered no answers. She checked the ceiling crack again, but it was superficial, another false lead. Back in the parlor, Miss Marple shared a calculated observation. The body's position in the snow suggests it was placed, not fallen. The lack of tracks is troubling, but the storm may not be the only eraser of evidence. The group reacted. Victor's hands clenched. Clara gasped softly. Sarah spilled tea. Beatrice's glass shook. Reginald snapped, "What are you implying? Someone carried her out there in this storm without leaving a trace?" Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Impossibilities often hide simple truths, Mr. Sinclair." She turned to the red herrings, testing their weight. A scrap of paper found in the hall bearing the words, "Will changed," was too convenient, likely planted. Beatrice's mention of scandalous letters felt like a distraction, meant to muddy the waters. The rope Tom mentioned could suggest a pulley system, but no evidence supported it yet. Miss Marple probed Sarah again. Your pocket held coins this morning, but it bulged last night. Did you remove something? Sarah's eyes widened, then narrowed. Nothing, miss. Just my things. Her lie was palpable, and Miss Marple suspected a key or tool had been hidden. The group's alibis began to crack under scrutiny. Victor admitted to leaving his room briefly to check on Amelia but found her door locked. Reginald confessed to a late-night walk in the hall, claiming insomnia. Clara, pressed further, admitted hearing a muffled sound but thought it was the storm. Beatrice's sleeping draft story wavered when she mentioned waking briefly to adjust the fire. Sarah's thud remained the only concrete event, but its timing was vague. Tom's insistence on the rope felt rehearsed, as if he wanted it noticed. Miss Marple planted another seed. Suppose the locked room wasn't locked at all. Suppose the key was turned after Amelia was gone. The idea sparked unease. Victor paled. Reginald stopped pacing. Clara's scarf slipped from her hands. The truth, Miss Marple knew, was close, but the method of Amelia's exit and the killer's path remained hidden. The storm, the snow, the sealed cottage, they were all part of the killer's stage, and Miss Marple was determined to pull back the curtain. Chapter 8. Hidden Clues and Deceptions. The late afternoon of January 13, 1927, cast Snowfield Cottage in a dim, oppressive light. The blizzard outside a ceaseless roar that mirrored the turmoil within. Amelia Sinclair's murder, her body found in a snowdrift with a fatal blow to the temple. Her disappearance from a locked room in Enigma had turned the gathered guests into a tableau of suspicion and fear. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting now a mere prop on her lap, sat in the parlor, her sharp eyes moving from face to face. The clues, the half-written letter, the melted candle, the scuff mark, the missing pearl necklace, the lone earring, were pieces of a puzzle, but deception clouded the truth. Her interrogations had cracked alibis, revealing inconsistencies, and now she sought the hidden threads that would unravel the killer's design. The group was fractious, their nerves frayed by confinement and accusation. Victor Langford, Amelia's fiancé, gripped his sketchbook, his grief now laced with defensiveness. Reginald Sinclair Jr., his cigar extinguished, paced with a scowl, his resentment a constant undercurrent. Aunt Beatrice Hargrove, her sherry glass empty, sat stiffly, her sharp tongue dulled by unease. Clara Beaumont, the society friend, clutched her silk scarf, her eyes darting nervously. Sarah Wilkins, the maid, moved silently, her face a mask of exhaustion or guilt. Old Tom Hargreaves, the gardener, stood by the fire, his gruff demeanor hiding something unspoken. Lady Constance, Miss Marple's confidant, whispered, "Jane, the tension is unbearable. Someone here is lying, perhaps all of them." Miss Marple nodded, her voice calm but firm. "Lies, my dear Constance, are like loose stitches. They unravel with a gentle tug. Let us examine the clues closely." She addressed the group, her tone conversational yet piercing. Amelia's room was locked, the key inside, the windows bolted, yet she was found outside, dead, with no tracks in the snow. The candle, the letter, the necklace, these are not accidents. Someone here knows how this was done. She began with a new clue, one she'd noticed in the bedroom during her latest inspection. A faint smudge of soot on the windowsill near the melted candle. "This soot," she said, holding up a handkerchief stained with the residue, "is fresh. Yet the chimney is too narrow for passage. Why was it there?" The group shifted, uncomfortably. Victor's fingers tightened on his sketchbook, and Miss Marple recalled its worn edges. "Mr. Langford, may I see your sketches?" she asked. Victor hesitated, then handed it over, revealing mundane landscapes, except for one, a hasty drawing of Amelia's window, with a string looped around the latch. "A study for a painting," he said quickly, but his voice wavered. Miss Marple tucked the sketchbook under her arm. "A string could suggest a trick to lock the door or window from outside, but the bolts are too stiff." A clever misdirection, perhaps. Victor flushed, insisting, "It's just a drawing." But the group's eyes turned on him. Reginald snapped, "You're too quick to defend yourself, Langford. Hiding something?" Clara, defending Victor, said, "He's an artist, not a killer." Her loyalty seemed genuine, but Miss Marple noted her clenched fists. Next, she turned to the scuff mark near Amelia's bed, now clearer in her mind as a drag mark, suggesting a body moved briefly before being carried elsewhere. She revisited the room with Constance, the others too agitated to follow. The mark led toward the window but stopped short as if the movement was interrupted. She examined the windowsill again, noticing a faint scratch on the latch barely visible. Could a tool have been used to manipulate it? She tested the bolt, finding it stiff but not impossible to move with force. The soot, she realized, might have come from a tool heated in the fire, used to tamper with the latch. Back in the parlor, Miss Marple shared her findings selectively. The scratch on the window latch suggests tampering, but the snow outside shows no disturbance. The killer used the storm's chaos, but how? Sarah, pouring tea, dropped a cup, the crash startling everyone. "Sorry, miss," she muttered, but her eyes avoided Miss Marple's. The maid's apron pocket, once bulging, was now flat, but Miss Marple suspected she'd hidden something, a key perhaps, or a tool. She pressed Sarah. "You heard a thud, you said. Could it have been from the hall, not the room?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe." It was muffled, hard to tell. Her uncertainty felt rehearsed, and Miss Marple recalled the cloth bag of coins. Too convenient an explanation. She turned to Tom, who'd mentioned the cut rope. "Mr. Hargreaves, where exactly was this rope?" Tom scratched his beard. "In the shed, near the back door. Looked like it had been used recent, but I can't say for what." The rope was another loose thread, possibly a red herring, but Miss Marple noted Tom's eagerness to mention it. A new clue emerged when Clara, nervous, dropped her scarf, revealing a small burn mark on her wrist. "It's nothing," she said, pulling her sleeve down. "I brushed the fireplace yesterday." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Had Clara handled the candle or a heated tool? She probed gently. "Miss Beaumont, you were close to Amelia. Did she ever mention a duplicate key to her room?" Clara shook her head, but her eyes flickered to Sarah, a subtle betrayal of suspicion. The group's alibis began to crumble further. Reginald admitted to hearing a creak in the hall before Sarah's scream, but claimed it was the house settling. Beatrice, pressed about her damp gloves, confessed to opening the back door to clear my head, but insisted she saw nothing. Victor's sketchbook, when examined closer, revealed a torn page suggesting a missing drawing, perhaps one that incriminated him. Sarah, when asked again about her pocket, grew defensive. "I told you, just coins. Why do you keep asking?" Her agitation was a clue in itself. Miss Marple planted a deliberate misdirection to test reactions. "Suppose the killer used a hidden passage we've not yet found. Old houses like this often have them." The idea sparked unease. Reginald stopped pacing. Victor's sketchbook slipped from his grasp. Clara gasped, and Sarah's hands froze on the teapot. Beatrice scoffed. "Nonsense. This house has no such secrets." But her quick dismissal felt forced. Miss Marple knew no passage existed. She'd checked, but the reactions were telling. A sudden commotion interrupted her thoughts. Tom, who'd slipped out to check the shed again, returned with a shout. "Found this in the snow near where Miss Amelia was." He held up a small metal tool, its tip blackened as if heated. "It's mine, but I didn't leave it there," he said, his eyes darting to Sarah. The tool, a pry bar, could explain the scratch on the window latch, but its placement in the snow was too convenient. Another possible plant. Miss Marple examined the tool, noting its warmth despite the cold. "This was used recently," she said, watching the group. Sarah's face paled and Clara's burn mark seemed suddenly significant. Victor, regaining composure, said, "Someone's trying to frame us all, aren't they?" His words were a deflection, but Miss Marple sensed truth in the chaos. The killer was weaving a web of clues and counter-clues, using the storm's cover to obscure their path. As evening fell, the group's accusations grew wilder. Reginald accused Sarah of stealing a key. Sarah snapped at Beatrice for her cruel words about Amelia, and Clara, tearful, begged Victor to tell the truth about his debts. Beatrice, her sherry gone, muttered about curses and greed. Tom, silent, watched it all, his rope and tool mentions feeling like bait. Miss Marple, her knitting resumed, let the chaos unfold, each outburst a stitch in the pattern. The truth was close, she knew. The soot, the scratch, the burn mark, the missing page. They pointed to a staged scene, a killer who'd planned meticulously but left traces of haste. The locked room was no longer the mystery, it was the killer's confidence that would betray them. As the storm howled, Miss Marple's mind sharpened, ready to pull the final thread that would unravel the deception cloaking Snowfield Cottage. Chapter 9. Twists in the Blizzard. The evening of January 13th, 1927 cloaked Snowfield Cottage in a darkness that the flickering parlor fire could scarcely dispel. The blizzard outside raged with unrelenting fury, piling snow against the windows and sealing the inhabitants in a crucible of suspicion. Amelia Sinclair's murder, her body found in a snowdrift with a fatal blow to the temple, her disappearance from a locked room, a baffling impossibility, had pushed the household to the edge. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting now a silent companion, sat with a calm that belied the storm within her mind. The clues, the half-written letter, the melted candle, the scuff mark, the missing pearl necklace, the lone earring, the soot smudge, the scratched window latch, the burned page, the pry bar, were threads in a tapestry, but new twists were emerging, threatening to unravel her progress. The guests were a study in frayed nerves. Victor Langford, Amelia's fiancé, sat rigidly, his sketchbook clutched like a shield, his earlier grief now tinged with defiance. Reginald Sinclair Jr., his cigar extinguished, glowered from a corner, his resentment a palpable force. Aunt Beatrice Hargrove, her sherry glass empty, muttered about curses, her composure eroded. Clara Beaumont, the society friend, twisted her silk scarf, her eyes darting between Victor and the door. Sarah Wilkins, the maid, moved with a ghost-like quiet, her face pale and guarded. Old Tom Hargreaves, the gardener, stood by the fire, his gruff silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. Lady Constance, Miss Marple's ally, whispered, "Jane, I fear we're no closer to the truth. The lies are piling up like the snow." Miss Marple nodded, her voice steady. "Truth, Constance, is like a snowflake, unique but easily buried. We must dig deeper." She addressed the group, her tone deliberate like a village matron unraveling a scandal. Amelia's death was planned, her vanishing staged. The clues we've found, some are true, others false. But something new has happened, hasn't it? Something to shake the killer's confidence. Her words were met with uneasy glances, but before anyone could respond, a crash echoed from the upstairs hall. The group froze, then rushed toward the sound, Miss Marple trailing with purposeful calm. In the corridor outside Clara's room, a vase lay shattered, and Clara herself stood trembling, a letter clutched in her hand. "Someone pushed it," she gasped. "I came out to fetch water, and it fell. Someone was here." Her eyes, wide with fear, darted to Reginald, then Sarah. The letter, Miss Marple noted, was crumpled as if read in haste. Victor seized the moment, his voice sharp. "This is no accident. Someone's trying to silence us." Reginald scoffed. "Or you're staging it, Langford, to deflect suspicion." Sarah, her hands twisting her apron, muttered, "It's this house. Cursed, like I said." Beatrice, swaying slightly, snapped, "Nonsense. Clara's just clumsy. Tom, inspecting the shards, grunted. Vase didn't fall on its own. Someone's playing games. Miss Marple knelt by the debris, her eyes catching a glint, a tiny pearl identical to Amelia's earring and missing necklace. Curious, she said, pocketing it discreetly. Miss Beaumont, what's in that letter? Clara hesitated, then handed it over, her hands shaking. It was a note, unsigned, in a hurried scrawl. You know too much. Leave it alone. Miss Marple's mind raced. This was no red herring. It was a warning, and it suggested the killer was growing desperate. She steered the group back to the parlor, her questions sharper now. This letter changes things. Someone feels threatened. Let's revisit your stories. Any omissions? Victor, defensive, insisted. I've told you everything. I was asleep until Sarah's scream. But Miss Marple recalled his sketchbook's torn page. Mr. Langford, your missing page. Did it show something incriminating? Victor flushed, stammering. It was just a sketch of the grounds. I tore it out. It was poor work. His lie was thin, and Clara's glance at him held a mix of fear and pity. Reginald, pressed again, admitted to more. Fine. I heard a door creak before the scream. Not just the house settling. Thought it was Amelia, maybe checking the hall. I didn't go look. His candor felt forced, as if covering a deeper truth. Beatrice, her voice slurred, confessed to waking twice in the night, not once, to check the fire and glance outside. Her damp gloves, Miss Marple noted, suggested more than a glance. Sarah, when questioned about the thud, grew vague. It was maybe from the stairs, not her room. I was half asleep. Her shifting story tightened the knot of suspicion around her. Clara, clutching the threatening note, broke down. I knew about Victor and Amelia's quarrels, she admitted, tears spilling. She told me he was pressing her to marry quickly for the will's terms. I was jealous, yes, but I didn't hurt her. Her confession revealed a tangled motive. Jealousy not just of Amelia, but of Victor's devotion. Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her mind hardened on Clara's burn mark, possibly from handling the heated pry bar. Tom, unprompted, offered another clue. Found snow on the back steps this morning, packed tight, like someone walked there before it piled up. Miss Marple's interest peaked. Snow packed before the storm's peak could indicate an early exit, but the absence of tracks to Amelia's body complicated it. She tested a theory. Suppose the killer used the snow itself, packed it to create a temporary path, then let the storm erase it. The idea sparked reactions. Victor's jaw tightened, Sarah dropped a spoon, Clara gasped, and Beatrice's glass shook. Reginald snorted. That's absurd. You'd need hours to plan that. Miss Marple revisited the bedroom alone, the clues gnawing at her. The soot smudge, the scratched latch, the drag mark, they suggested a staged exit, but the method eluded her. She examined the window again, noticing a faint groove in the sill, as if a thin wire had been pulled tight. A sudden inspiration struck. Could an ice bridge, a temporary ledge formed by packed snow and frozen water, have been used to exit the window, then melted or collapsed under the storm's weight? She tested the window's frame, finding it slightly loose, as if forced briefly. The snow outside, though undisturbed now, could have been smoothed by the blizzard's force. Back in the parlor, she shared her hypothesis cautiously. An ice bridge formed and melted could explain the lack of tracks. Someone clever used the storm's chaos. The group's reactions were telling. Sarah's hands froze, Clara's eyes widened, and Victor's sketchbook slipped again. Miss Marple pressed Tom. Your pry bar, was it used to pack snow, perhaps? Tom shook his head, but his unease was clear. Didn't touch it, miss, but someone did. A new twist emerged when Sarah, under pressure, admitted to finding a duplicate key in the kitchen days before. "I thought it was for the pantry," she said, her voice trembling. "I kept it in my pocket then. Hid it when you asked." She produced it, a small brass key matching Amelia's door. Miss Marple's heart quickened. This explained the locked room, but not the snow. Had Sarah used it to enter, kill Amelia, then stage the vanishing? Or was she a pawn in a larger scheme? The group's accusations flared. Reginald pointed at Sarah. "You had the key. You let someone in," Sarah snapped. "And you wanted her fortune. Don't pin this on me." Clara, tearful, accused Victor of manipulating her silence, while Beatrice muttered about family greed. Tom Silent watched with narrowed eyes, his rope and pry bar mentions feeling like bait. Miss Marple, her knitting resumed. Let the chaos unfold, each outburst a clue. The ice bridge, the duplicate key, the threatening note. They pointed to a killer who'd planned meticulously but was now rattled by her probing. The storm was their ally but also their betrayer, preserving clues in its frozen grip. As the night deepened, Miss Marple knew the final revelation was near, hidden in the blizzard's twists and the human heart's deceptions. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The night of January 13th, 1927 enveloped Snowfield Cottage in a suffocating embrace, the blizzard's howl a relentless chorus that underscored the dread within. The murder of Amelia Sinclair, her body found in a snowdrift with a fatal blow to the temple, her disappearance from a locked room a baffling impossibility, had woven a web of suspicion that entangled every guest. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting now folded neatly in her lap, stood before the gathered group in the parlor, her calm presence a beacon in the storm of accusations. The clues, the half-written letter, the melted candle, the scuff mark, the missing pearl necklace, the lone earring, the soot smudge, the scratched window latch, the burned page, the pry bar, the duplicate key, the threatening note, had coalesced into a pattern only she could see. The time had come to unravel it. The fire cast flickering shadows on the faces of Victor Langford, Reginald Sinclair Jr., Aunt Beatrice Hargrove, Clara Beaumont, Sarah Wilkins, and old Tom Hargreaves. Lady Constance, Miss Marple's confidant, sat nearby, her eyes wide with anticipation. The air was thick with tension, each guest poised as if awaiting a verdict. Miss Marple's voice, warm yet incisive, cut through the silence like a needle through cloth. "My dear friends," she began, "we have been trapped by this storm, but also by a crime that demanded cunning and nerve. Amelia's death was no accident, nor was her vanishing a miracle. It was a carefully staged act, and tonight we shall see the truth." She paced slowly, her eyes meeting each guest's. "Let us begin with the locked room. Amelia's door was locked, the key inside, the windows bolted, no tracks in the snow. Yet she was found dead outside, with a blow to the head and her necklace missing. The clues pointed to an impossible crime, but impossibilities are merely illusions. The key, literally, was the duplicate Sarah found. Sarah gasped, her hands twisting her apron. "I told you, miss, I thought it was for the pantry." Miss Marple raised a hand. "Patience, Sarah. You did have the key, but you were not alone in this." She turned to the group, her tone deliberate. "The killer used the duplicate to enter Amelia's room, struck her, and moved her body outside. But how, with no tracks? The answer lies in the storm itself, an ice bridge formed from packed snow and water, allowed passage from the window, then melted or collapsed under the blizzard's weight." Victor's face paled. "That's absurd. The window was bolted." Miss Marple nodded. "Indeed. But the scratch on the latch and the soot smudge suggest a heated tool. Like Tom's pry bar was used to force it briefly, then reseal it. The soot came from heating the bar in the fire." Tom, his eyes narrowing, grunted, "My bar was in the shed, not used by me." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Yet it was found in the snow, conveniently placed. A red herring, perhaps, but it led me to you." She turned to Sarah. "You heard a thud, you said, and ran to Amelia's door, but you lied about its source. It came from the hall where you were waiting. You had the duplicate key, Sarah, and you used it to enter her room after she locked it. You struck her, a single blow motivated by years of resentment for her family's mistreatment." Sarah's face crumpled, but she shook her head. "No, I didn't. I wouldn't," Miss Marple continued, her voice steady. "You didn't act alone. Old Tom, your loyalty to Sarah runs deep. Your families have known each other for years, haven't they? You shared her grudge against the Sinclairs, especially after Sir Reginald cheated you out of wages. You helped her stage the scene, packing snow to form the ice bridge, then carrying Amelia's body to the drift." Tom's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence damning. She turned to the clues. The half-written letter, "I fear for my," was a distraction, written by Sarah to suggest a threat. The melted candle was moved to imply a signal, another misdirection. The scuff mark was from dragging Amelia's body to the window. The missing necklace? "You took it, Sarah, as a trophy or to suggest robbery, but you dropped the earring in haste, and the second pearl Clara found confirmed it." Clara gasped, clutching her scarf. "I didn't know what it meant." Miss Marple nodded. "You were a pawn, Clara. Your jealousy over Victor used to muddy the waters." Beatrice's letters, Victor's sketch, Reginald's creaks, all were red herrings planted or exaggerated to confuse. Beatrice, her sherry glass shaking, muttered, "I told you I saw letters." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "You did, but they were old, irrelevant. Another distraction." Reginald, his voice hoarse, said, "Why Sarah? Why Tom?" Miss Marple sighed. "Motive, Mr. Sinclair. Sarah's years of service were rewarded with scorn, her loyalty ignored. Tom's grudge against your father extended to Amelia, who refused to settle his claim. Together they saw a chance not just for revenge, but for a share of the fortune. Sarah knew the will's terms, that without Amelia's marriage, the estate might revert to the family, including her as a distant cousin." Victor, his voice breaking, said, "But I loved her." Miss Marple's gaze was kind but firm. "You did, but your debts made you a suspect, a convenient distraction. Your sketch of the window was innocent, but the torn page suggested guilt, didn't it?" Victor nodded, tears falling. Sarah broke, sobbing. "It wasn't meant to go this far. She treated me like dirt after all I did. Tom said we could make it look like an accident, use the storm, the snow." Tom, his face grim, added, "I helped her, Sinclair's owed me, and her death would have settled it." Their confessions, raw and unfiltered, filled the room with a heavy silence. Miss Marple concluded, "You used the duplicate key to enter, struck Amelia and carried her out via the ice bridge, which melted by morning. The pry bar forced the window, the soot marking your haste. The necklace was your mistake, Sarah. You kept it, didn't you?" Sarah, trembling, pulled the pearl strand from her apron, its gleam accusing. I couldn't let it go." The group was stunned. Reginald sank into a chair, muttering, "My sister." Clara wept, clinging to Victor. Beatrice, her sherry. "Forgotten," whispered, "monstrous." Constance gripped Miss Marple's hand, her relief palpable. Miss Marple addressed them all. "The storm hid your crime, but it also trapped you. Human nature, like my knitting, reveals its pattern in time." With the truth laid bare, the cottage felt lighter, though the storm raged on. Miss Marple instructed Constance to guard the necklace and key as evidence. Sarah and Tom, their defiance gone, sat in silence, awaiting the police, who would come when the snow allowed. The others, shaken but relieved, began to talk of plans, of healing. Miss Marple, her knitting resumed, reflected on the fragility of trust and the clarity of truth, even in the darkest blizzard. As the fire crackled, she spoke softly to Constance. In St. Mary Mead, I've seen greed and anger unravel lives. Here it was no different. But now, peace can return. The storm, as if in agreement, seemed to lessen, its howl softening to a sigh. Snowfield Cottage, once a stage for murder, could now be a place of closure, its secrets laid bare by a spinster's quiet logic.